Hi guys, today I'm going to review the Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro. It is a very thin ultrabook and it has some nice tricks up its sleeve as the completely foldable design. It is pretty nice in overall, but it also has a few weaknesses and some flaws, and I will talk about them in my review. So before I want to start with the actual review, let's get through the key specs here real quick. We have a 13.3 inch display with a resolution of 3200 by 1800, powered by an Intel i7 4500U, 8GB of RAM, 512GB of SSD storage, and the device weighs 1.37 kilos. There are lower spec configurations available with an i3, i4, 4GB and also 128 and 256GB of storage. Let's get around the device real quick and check the ports first. We have the port for the charging, USB 3.0, micro HDMI and an SD card slot. On the front there is nothing, and on the right hand side we have the power button. Here we have the rotation lock, the volume buttons, a headphone jack, a combined one with a microphone, and another USB 2.0, the other one is 3.0. Otherwise that's about it, so let's get and check the design now. Let's head over and check the design and the build quality. First of all, the device with 1.37 kilos feels fairly light. It has here a nice soft touch coating which feels pretty nice, the same is on the back, so the feel in the hand is nice. As for the design itself, it is very thin as you can already see, and this is pretty a nice thing. Let's show off the modes first. We have of course the typical laptop mode. Then there's this kind of weird tent mode, which I really didn't see that much of a benefit, because as you can see, that's the same position you have in laptop mode as well. Then you also have tablet mode, nothing also special. And then you have this kind of media mode, which I'm not impressed as for what it is, because what I usually did, I had it on my lap and used it now like a sort of tablet, but not really when I otherwise, because the most two options you will use is the laptop mode and this sort of media mode is when you use it as a tablet, but you won't really use it like this because it's a bit awkward because of the buttons and the whole positioning doesn't really feel right. But otherwise, let's check the keyboard real quick, and that's one of the biggest problems I have with this. And the thing is that, as you can see, this button line here, I really can't understand why they did this, because I'm used to on every keyboard to have the delete, the backspace key and the enter as the last buttons on the side. And if you type longer and have your hand steady, it is okay. But whenever you quickly want to type something and grab it, you will always want to hit this delete button instead of the backspace. And also for the enter, I always tended to hit this, and I think this is extremely annoying. And like I said, otherwise the key travel is okay. It could be a bit more. The feeling wasn't the best, but it is okay. The trackpad itself is a bit small, but worked pretty fine. So in overall, the build quality of the device itself is absolutely great. It feels super light. And in terms of the positions, they are nice to have, even though not all of them are really useful. But my problem is the keyboard, so I'm not the biggest fan of that. Let's head over and talk about the display quality. We have a resolution of 3200 by 1200, and the only benefit of this resolution is noticeable when you are using modern UI apps or apps that scale properly. But the issue is a lot of apps like Adobe and a lot of video editors just aren't scaling properly, or some apps don't scale at all. And then you have the problem, either everything is super tiny or things get blurry. So it's a trade-off in either way. As for the brightness, you can see it is not super bright. I would have wished for more. You have at least to use 70% to get somehow of a good experience, and in bright rooms 100% you will almost need all the time. The blacks itself are okay, but also nothing groundbreaking. They could definitely be deeper. I've seen better ones for sure. The white itself was okay in terms of the color temperature. Colors are fine, a bit dull, but the main issue for the colors is the yellow. There was a fix for that, but I don't really see a big improvement. It is still pretty mustardy, the yellow. It is not a bright yellow, and in overall, not extremely satisfied with the yellow. Otherwise, for watching videos, it's not so great because you see a lot of artifacts in videos which aren't noticeable, maybe because of the contrast and something like that. But like I said, not the best for videos. It gets a job done and it's a good experience. But from such a high resolution display, I thought it would also be high quality, and it's a bit disappointing. The viewing angles are okay in every side. It loses a bit of contrast and brightness, but that's totally normal. One big issue I have though is the high pitch tone, the whistling that the display makes when you are at least at 30%. It starts at 30% brightness, and the higher you get, the more volume this pitch tone gets and the higher frequency it gets. And for me, with my sensitive ears, it gets pretty annoying, and it's really ear piercing, and it's almost hurting my ears. So in overall, the screen is unnecessarily sharp. You don't really take any advantage of it. It's more of a burden than of a benefit. The overall qualities of the display are okay. They are good, but nothing really more. There is a small weakness in the yellow, as I said. Blacks could be deeper, and the high pitched tone is really annoying. So in overall, I really expected way more of this display, but I was pretty disappointed by it. It's not bad by any means, but you would expect way more. After the not so impressive display, what about the sound? And let's check it real quick. Okay, my opinion of the sound, we were at 100% and the maximum volume is fine, but I think the Dell Venue 11 Pro was definitely louder, but it is definitely more than loud enough. Mostly I used it at 70 or 80% for watching YouTube videos, and only if you want a really loud experience, 100% should do the job fine. There is bass, what is pretty nice, not really impressive one, but it is good. The mids and the treble are fine, very balanced, fine, slightly warm, which is nice. It is more than okay for videos and for music. So in overall, good maximum volume that could still be a bit higher, very nice and clear sound with a good amount of bass, and should be more than okay for every Ultrabook. So in overall, good sound. Let's check the performance now and get the numbers out of the way first. Here you can see the disk speeds, they are pretty good. 450 for read is great, write could be a bit better, but everything over 300 is still very good, the 4K also, but in overall the disk speeds are fine, it shouldn't be a problem at all. As for the browser performance, I will do 4 categories here. I will do it for Internet Explorer, for Chrome and for Firefox, and I try to keep it short. What I will check, I will tell you about the loading times, then the scrolling on the touchpad, on the touch screen and with a mouse, because the browsing is still for me the most important part on every machine. So let's get to it. The loading times on Internet Explorer, hands down the best. Next one would be Firefox, and Chrome as the last, with a noticeable difference. You see the rendering, which isn't noticeable on all the other ones. As for the scrolling on the touch screen, as you can see, we have Internet Explorer here, and it is extremely buttery smooth, fast, fine. On Chrome, once the page is loaded, it is, as you can see, pretty nice, but it is also, it feels more heavy. It feels heavier for some reason, and it is not as smooth. And once the page is loaded, it is good, but while loading, it won't be that smooth. On Firefox, things looks completely different, as you can already see. It is not smooth, not even while loaded, but since the loading time isn't that good, but for the touch screen, it isn't really usable. As for the touch pad, and we check Internet Explorer, as you can see, super buttery smooth. Nothing to improve here, absolutely fine. What about Chrome? On a touchpad, the difference is way smaller. As you can see, it is smooth. It is not that smooth, and you see some re-rendering from time to time. But in overall, it is way better. Firefox, not even with a mouse pad. As you can see with the touchpad, it is still jittery, jaggy, and not really smooth. But what about the mouse? And this is what I personally would still use the most. As you can see, smooth, buttery, fast, no problem on Internet Explorer. On Chrome, not smooth, but I don't want it that way, because with a mouse I prefer this hard scrolling. and it is absolutely fine. And here the difference is way more small, and I would think on the long term Chrome would be my default one. What about Firefox? Here's the issue: once you use the touchpad, the scrolling somehow changes. Let me try to turn it on again, because somehow the scrolling gets pretty slow. Now it's better again. As you can see, while the page is a bit loading, it is jaggy, but once the page is loaded, you can see it is this hard scrolling, and it is way better. But still, I could use it now with a mouse as my default one, but not with a touch screen, not with a touchpad. So that's about the browser performance. As for the Wi-Fi performance, we have only single band and limited to BG and N, and the reception is good, but the speeds for a device in late 2014 not really impressive. I only got speeds between 7 and 13 megabytes per second, where on all other dual band devices 15 to 20 at least are no problem. So if you use a lot of Wi-Fi and want high speeds, this is not the right device. For video and photo editing, it was surprisingly good. It worked pretty nice, but the issue is the scaling here, and I will show you this later in the software part, because the most video editors just don't scale and you will have a hard time using it. But in terms of performance, it is fine. So in overall, we have a good performance device, because 8 gigabytes of RAM are no problem, heavier multitasking is no problem, and for every usual normal task, modern UI apps, YouTube videos, Office are not even no problem at all. The device is easily capable of doing that. Video editing, no problem, and for everything else. So for an Ultrabook, the performance is way more okay. It is no desktop level after all. That's it for the performance. Let's talk about the battery and the noise levels here. First of all, a full charge needs 2.5 hours, and that's pretty impressive, amongst the best here, no problem at all. As for the active times though, the battery life, I got an average of 4 hours and 20, but some values here seem a bit odd to me, because I can't really believe I used it for 8 hours on one charge. Because for me it mostly felt like maybe 6 hours, and I would say expect something between 5.5 to 6 hours, because those higher values like the 7 hours seem a bit too odd. Those 5:15, 5:30 and 5:30 again, those seem more reasonable for me. I would say expect everything about 5 and 6 hours. On really low use maybe more, but overall not that impressive. As for the noise of the fans, in normal use, I don't think they are even running. They are barely noticeable at all. If the device gets under heavier load, they get louder, but it is no annoying voice. It is something like a strong breeze, but not really like fans roaring. And this is pretty nice one. It is no unpleasant sound. So in overall, this is okay. But for me, a more annoying sound is the display sound I already talked about. You will mostly use the device at least 70%, and then this high-pitched whistling is really noticeably, for me at least, to hear. I don't know, maybe if you don't have that good ears, or maybe if you have always some background sound, it is okay, but for me in a quiet room it is extremely annoying. So in overall, we have great charging speeds. The battery life is average at best, not really more. Overly, the sound of the device itself, the noise is very good, besides the display whistling, which is a killer for me, a really deal breaker. Let's head over and talk about software and stability, and here are a few weaknesses noticeable that could have made better. First of all, there is just too much Lenovo bloat. They put so much software in it you won't ever use. That's a downside for me. The other one is whenever you change the mode of the device, a pop-up with a sound will appear here, and that's pretty annoying, because I think after 2 or 3 times of using the modes, I think you know what you want and you don't have to be reminded every time in which mode you are. So that's an annoying thing. But the other thing is the scaling here, and this is not because of the software, not only, but mostly because of the crazy high resolution. As you can already see, this is an app that doesn't scale properly. It is Cyberlink Power Director, and try to use this now. Everything is so super tiny. Every menu, these are okay, but if you look at the native menus here, everything is so super tiny, and it is really a pain to work with this. So as long as apps don't get scaled properly or optimized, like all the Adobe apps and most of the video editors, it is pretty hard to use this device. Another pretty annoying issue is the screen dimming, the adaptive one. You have 3 options in the Windows to disable it. One in the driver, one in the Windows itself, and one in the modern UI settings. And all of those 3 doesn't seem to work, because if you go into a dark app, the screen will dim in 3 or 4 steps. And if you go into a white app, you will see the screen slightly go brighter again. It is not noticeable right now, but it is pretty annoying, and I couldn't get rid of it, even though I tried everything I saw on the internet. So in overall, the OS itself is fine and stable, no problem here. The screen dimming is an issue, and especially the scaling, which is a major downside, because working with this resolution on some of the apps is just not a really satisfying option. So one of these can be fixed, the dimming should be fixed, but the useless high resolution is still a big problem. Let's get to the summary, and then I will end this review answering 2 questions I think are still pretty important. And first of all, sorry I couldn't really show off everything as good as I wanted, but my tripod options were a bit limited, but therefore I will take a bit more time for the summary and my overall impressions and what I think of this device. So as for the device, the port and button placement is very logical, very smart, no problem here at all. The amount of all the ports is good. Maybe the USB 2.0 could also be 3.0, but no real big issue. The design itself and the weight of this device and the build quality, everything is fine here, no problem at all. But I have a problem with the design of the layout of the keyboard, because like I showed in the review, I don't like the last row of the buttons. I would have preferred that to be the enter and the backspace key. Maybe that's a small issue for you, but for me personally, it's one of the bigger issues of this device. As for the display, I still think it is insanely high resolution. It is, I would even say, stupid to use such a high resolution. It is more to show off what they can. But I would have preferred a high quality 1080p screen instead of this maybe average 3200 by 1800 screen, because they really didn't take any advantage of the high resolution, and it is more a burden than of a benefit, because either you have to use the 1080p resolution and then have no benefit at all, or you have the high resolution and then have problems with apps not scaling right. As for the sound, that one is completely out of the question. It is good, it is loud enough, the sound is very nicely balanced, it has bass and everything else. The performance in overall also very good. I had no problem at all, and I was even surprised, because when I used the Spectre 13 a few months ago and reviewed that, for me the performance seemed way less impressive. Maybe it is because of Windows 8.1, maybe it is because of all the browsers got also updated, but especially the browser performance with Firefox is now acceptable, Chrome is way better, and Internet Explorer was out of the question as well. Anyways, for gaming, I don't think it's a gaming device. It is not made for it, it is not planned for it. So you can do some light gaming, but don't expect really any gaming performance here. Video and photo editing, no problem at all, works, but as again, it's a bit cumbersome because of the scaling issue. So that's for that part. If we talk about the battery life is a bit disappointing. I would have expected at least solid 6 hours or 7 hours, like all the other tablets, all the other notebooks seem to have, those ultrabooks. It seems to be on the lower end here, therefore the charging is pretty quick. That's for that. The noise is absolutely fine. I had really no problem, because the noise, even if louder, was never unpleasant to hear. But what was, and I talked about it in the display, this high-pitched tone is really piercing into my eyes, and I have sensitive ears, and therefore I had really a big problem with the display here in that part. As for the software, it is very stable. Windows 8.1 is a satisfying experience overall, but there are 2 issues I had with the software, maybe even 3. A bit too much bloat, then the screen dimming option that couldn't be easily deactivated and is pretty annoying, especially if you jump a lot from dark apps and bright apps, then it was annoying. And then there's the scaling thing, which is of course more a Windows problem itself, but if they wouldn't have used such a high resolution display, it wouldn't happen. Now I want to finish this review and answer 2 questions which I always tend to answer. Would I recommend this device and would I buy it? As for the recommend part, usually I say yes, but, and then talk about the weaknesses, and if one of those isn't an issue for you, you can buy it. But this time I have really a hard time recommending it, because the battery life isn't the best. I can't stand the keyboard layout at all. The display is okay at best, but the resolution is just stupid in my opinion. They should have used something lower res. 1440p would have been fine. That worked on the Spectre, but 3200 by 1800 is just too much. Then it's also very pricey. So in overall, if everything of that is no problem for you, and of course there's still this high pitched tone I didn't really like. If all of those things are no deal breaker for you, go ahead and buy it. But I have no good conscience recommending it. I just can't do it. And for the would I buy it part, definitely no, because it is too expensive, and it is I would have made too many compromises. If there is a lower spec version with a 1080p screen, and that one would maybe be the better option, because 1080p screen would also maybe result in a better battery quality, battery life, and that would have maybe be the better option. But there you only have a normal spinning hard drive and no SSD. That's maybe okay, but then there's still the problem with the keyboard. On a laptop where you use primarily the keyboard for typing and no external keyboard, it is pretty important, and I really couldn't get used to it no matter how long and hard I've tried. So then there's still this. If I could ever get my hands on it, I would really like to try to see if there's really an improvement, because I don't think the display would have this high pitched tone, and the resolution problem would be solved. Maybe also the dimming problem and everything else, and all the good qualities would be there, because it has some good qualities. The design is great, the functionality is great of the four modes, and the build quality is great, the weight is great. But as I said, there are the downsides, and so in overall, I wouldn't buy it, and I have a hard time recommending it. So that's it for the review of the Lenovo Yoga 2 Pro with the i7 version. I hope you liked it. I hope it was any help for you deciding if you want to buy it or not. And if you like this review, please give me a thumbs up. It would really help me a lot, and I would appreciate it. Subscribe to my channel. Okay, bye.
I'll be back.